a special edition of Arise and Shine. I'm Pryor.
And I'm Lola Ogunnaike, and today we're devoting the entire show to the shocking story of Rachel Dolezal, the former head of Spokane's NAACP, who was exposed for changing her race from white to black.
Right?
Yeah.
And from the term transracial, which I'm not a fan of, to sex tape. There are so many different bizarre sides and revelations to this story.
So many.
Right?
Yes.
Too many, girl. And we'll get back into some of them today with our special panel of experts.
Yes.
Renowned psychiatrist Dr. Janet Taylor is here with her take, sociology professor.
Anne Morning,
yes.
she's also here, and she'll share her knowledge about the term transracial. I know you don't like that term, but we've got to unpack it today.
We do.
And educator Dr. Aliyu Michael, who wrote the article, I Sometimes Don't Want to Be White Either, will be joining us as well.
She must have known my mother. Lola, as you know, the scandal has not only had the entire nation buzzing,
it's true,
but celebrity tweets are also burning up the internet, and I think I told you mine was on MSNBC.
Wow, that's
so
fantastic.
Right?
So what else are people
so
saying out there? You're not the only celebrity talking.
Kelly Osbourne attracted
a
lot of attention with her Instagram photo wearing a curly-haired wig and dark jacket similar to Rachel Dolezal's, with her hashtag Call Me Rachel, reminiscent of Caitlyn Jenner's cover Call Me Caitlyn on the cover of Vanity Fair.
Yeah, oh Kelly,
Scandal.
I think it's a little too soon. She might have wanted to wait till next week for that picture.
Yeah, just maybe some of Kelly's fans were critical ever since she, quit Fashion Police after co-host, right?
Juliana Rancic.
Yeah, made an insensitive remark about Zendaya, who's also really beautiful, about her dreadlocks.
You know, Kelly wasn't the only one having fun on the internet, though. Comedian D.L. Hughley wrote, people lie to gain advantage, but the minute Rachel Dolezal said she was black, her credit score went down and her blood pressure went up.
Right? You know it's true.
Comedian Wanda Sykes had this to say, now that it's all out there in the open, I just want to know, can I get my wig back?
Those were good wigs.
Those were great wigs, actually. She had me fooled.
Right, when she had the locks and the braids, girl got it done.
Yeah, she sure did.
Actress Lonnie Love. Who did this?
That's Hillary with the bold braids. That
all over
is
the internet, right? Actress, singer Bette Midler. Everybody's up in arms about Rachel Dolezal pretending to be black. Guess it's time for me to come clean too. I'm not actually a mermaid.
She's not actually a mermaid.
Right?
Shocking.
I thought she was shocking.
Shocking.
I love the fins.
And Danny DeVito also weighed in. He said Jennifer Lawrence as Rachel Dolezal. I'd go see that one.
Wait a minute. I'm the closest one looking like Rachel.
No, that is your role, and I want you to fight for it, right?
I'm going to fight for it,
yes.
but I think actually Jennifer Lawrence is going to get it.
Well, they're wrong.
Right.
I cast you as Rachel Dolezal.
Thank you. I should be Nina Simone. Just joking.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Oh, right. Well,
because that's how they do it.
Of course.
They never do it the right way.
They never do it the right way. We're going to do it the right way here today,
yes,
though.
That's right.
But, on a more serious note, Soledad O'Brien, former CNN anchor, she tweeted, she wasn't lying. She was challenging the construct of race at the core of human consciousness. Got it?
No, I don't get it.
Yeah,
I don't think that's what was happening, but I respect Soledad.
All right, well, former basketball star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, let Rachel Dolezal be as black as she wants. Is there such a thing as race? How different are we from each other? So he's looking at it in a philosophical way as well.
I get it, but I don't understand the philosophy of it all. So that's what I'm glad we're going to be trying to get into, understanding
all of it. We're going to spend the whole hour unpacking all of that.
And I get more people need to think that way. Unfortunately, racial-motivated violence has dominated the headlines the past week with the tragic mass murder at the church in South Carolina. Arise, Priya Sridhar is coming to us live from Charleston with the latest. Hi, Priya.
Hey guys, I know you're talking a lot about race on today's show, and one thing I really want to point out is the people who are standing outside this church. They're people of all races, people of all ages, people from across the country, and really what they want to emphasize is that they're here to unify with the family members of the victims. As you know, the shooter's motivations was to incite a sort of race war here in the United States. We saw his manifesto that was published online. And he said that he had very sort of racist intentions. You saw him posing with the Confederate flags and at various Confederate memorials here in South Carolina. He was waving the Confederate flag, and he also wrote in that 2,500-word manifesto that he didn't feel very patriotic. You saw him in pictures spitting on the image of the American flag, and he made several public remarks over the past few months that got increasingly violent in nature. Even one of his roommates says that after a long night of drinking, he actually confessed that he wanted to carry out an attack like this, and that's exactly what he did here on Wednesday. But really, the message that's happening behind me is one of positivity. It's incredibly remarkable. The church actually opened for the first time since Wednesday night this morning. There were services, and people were singing, people were praying, people were laughing, and that's really the symbol that they want to get out. Actually, family members of the victims were able to address the 21-year-old suspect at a bond hearing on Friday, and incredibly, most of the messages that they relayed was one of forgiveness. And so incredible positivity we're seeing here in Charleston.
Thank you so much, Priya, for keeping us updated. Thank you so much for your coverage. Coming up, we're going to be discussing the dramatic reactions and revelations over Rachel Dolezal's decision to change her race.
From her elaborate deception to abandoning her white privilege, our roundtable of experts, all with diverse opinions, will get into it next, and we're going to be right back.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
If I was to build my own news network, I would love a correspondent in every country, every location, every city.
Shahanabat, Arise News, New Delhi.
Karim Gamaluddin, Arise News, Cairo.
Dale McEwen, Arise News, Karagosk.
James Blue, Arise News, Addis Ababa.
Ronnie Corvello, Arise News, São Paulo, Brazil.
We give them different angles on stories so they can get a different perspective of the people that they are looking at.
It's hard to pin down the exact number of Syrian refugees who have streamed across the border into Lebanon.
They stormed a media room in one of the hotels in Kuala Lumpur, holding placards reading, "Tell us the truth and return our families back to us."
Anchors and reporters that have covered wars, have covered disasters, have covered government shutdowns. There's nothing almost that this team hasn't experienced.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Arise News is a different kind of network. We are able to tell our own stories, and we're able to cover stories in a way that other media outlets don't do. We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well. Arise News is a place where we can tell stories in an interesting, factual, inclusive way like no one else in the business can.
Welcome back to Arise and Shine. Today we are discussing former Spokane, Washington NAACP President Rachel Dolezal, a biological white woman who changed her identity to black.
We've gathered a group of experts to be with us to offer their insight on race and identity. Dr. Aliyu Michael is a director at the Center for Race and Equity at the University of Pennsylvania and the author of the article, "I Sometimes Don't Want to Be White Either."
And Dr. Janet Taylor is a renowned psychiatrist and former chair of the National Black Women's Health Imperative. And Ann Morning is associate professor of sociology at New York University and the author of The Nature of Race, How Scientists Think and Teach About Human Difference. Welcome, ladies.
Yeah, welcome, ladies.
Yes,
Thank you so much for being here. So there's been a lot of discussion about Rachel Dolezal and about white privilege associated with Rachel's case. First of all, let's define what we all mean by white privilege, because it means different things to different people, and obviously you women have very diverse backgrounds. What does white privilege mean to each of you all? Ali, let's start with you first, since you are the resident white woman on our panel today.
I'll represent white people today.
You represent white people.
I think that privilege is just the opposite of oppression. So if you don't have to live with oppression, then you receive privilege. And so the opposite of racism is racial privilege. And what that means is that as a white person, I can speed, and often I don't. I've never been pulled over. I've never been ticketed. I speed all the time. If I'm in trouble, I can rely on cops usually to believe my story, to take care of me. I don't have to worry if I call the cops, are they going to shoot me or are they going to shoot my family? It means that I grew up in schools where most of my teachers looked like me, talked like me, understood my cultural background, and usually thought that I could even do better than I was already doing. They didn't see me as somebody who was
that had to struggle.
That had to struggle, exactly.
A few months ago, there were a series of tweets, a hashtag that went viral, criming while white. So you're referring to that as well. That was really popular on Twitter for some time. So. What does it mean to you?
I think it means given the benefit of the doubt. There's not a day that I don't wake up when I don't think about my blackness. I think about my daughters. I have 4 daughters, and they know that whatever they have to face is going to be in the lens of being a black person and a black woman. And that can wear on you depending on where you live, how you're received, and how strong your own self-identity is.
And for you as well?
I would say that white privilege is really the advantages that accrue to people based on where they sit in the racial hierarchy. And because the whole ideology of race, the very idea of race, was an idea that was invented by Europeans to benefit Europeans, white privilege is baked right into the system. We wouldn't have a race concept unless it was giving somebody advantages and giving disadvantages to others.
So do you think then that Rachel is taking advantage of her white privilege? You know, she changed her identity to African American woman. She then, went off to, even before that when she was at Howard, to then sue as a white woman. Like it almost seems she wears it to her benefit. Do you think that that's part of it?
I don't see her necessarily using the white privilege. I think when she sued as a white person, that's interesting given where she is now. But my sense is that a lot of what she's doing really is rooted in basic deception. And maybe she went overboard in the sense of you can identify with a certain group and not have to identify as. And I think for her to say, I am black, and to really perpetrate that, it indicates to me a deeper level of psychological dysfunction.
Now, what do you mean when you say basic deception?
Well, I mean, the fact that she had the picture with her black father. I mean, I've never talked to her. I don't know what her psychological functioning is. However, she went to such lengths to make sure that she was perceived as someone black. To me, it goes beyond identifying and really just trying to almost wear a mask.
So wouldn't that be extreme? That's what I'm saying. Isn't that extreme deception as opposed to a basic? Do you know what I mean? To me, because when I hear basic, I think of, no pun intended, little white lie.
This is not a little white lie.
It wasn't a little white lie, and yes, it was extreme, but I think at the center of it all, hopefully she was interested in civil rights and she was interested in making justice fair for everyone, but at the end of the day, there was something deceptive about it that I think really gets us off track about what we're talking about, and that is that spectrum of what it means to be white, black, Asian, Latina in this America we live in.
Do you think that she felt like she had to transition from a white woman to a black woman to have the sort of impact that she wanted to have? And do you think that in doing so, she actually ended up undermining her ability to impact race relations in this country?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, I think anything that she was trying to do has been undermined by the fact that nobody trusts her now.
Right. But is that also because of the fact that, as you mentioned, Dr. Taylor, she just consistently has lied? She claimed to have been born in a teepee. She wasn't born in a teepee. She claimed that her adopted brother was her son, not her son. She claimed to have experienced abuse in South Africa. She's never even been to South Africa. So when you put all of those lies together, doesn't it just make for someone who's more of a charlatan than anything else?
Well, I think what's really sad about this story is that it makes it seem like if you want to fight for racial justice, you have to be black, or you have to pretend to be black, or you have to be a person of color. When in reality, I think that there is a lot of space for white people to join the movement for racial justice and to act, but we have to act knowing that we're white. And we have to act from who we are and where we are. And, you know, there's a long history of the only people identifying with the category of whiteness are white supremacists. And so, or, you know, Beverly Daniel Tatum says to be white, you can be colorblind, you can be ignorant, or you can be racist. So if those are your options, who wants to be white? There's no category of anti-racist white person or white person who's trying to be anti-racist.
Professor Morning, I just saw, you know, you looked up, you kind of identified. So what?
Well, because, you know, I'm going to take a stand that maybe it's not going to be popular here, but while I agree that she's been deceptive on many counts, absolutely. I think that her fundamental claim that she is not really white or that she's really black, it's a hard one for us to call her on because racial categories don't have any objective truth to them in the first place. So to take issue also with something you said, exactly, there's no biology to our racial categories. There's no line in the sand between different groups of people that tells us genetically here's a white person and here's a black person. When we think, you know, President Obama is black even though he's a white mother, not because of something biological. There's nothing biological about him which makes him more black than he is white. But we have a social norm, the one-drop rule. That social rule is what determines what races there are out there and who belongs in them.
And our socioeconomic statuses
and
have
all of
referred
that
back
filters
to
into
color.
how we decide who goes into which group. Absolutely. But so it's hard for me to say strictly that she is lying about her race because if there's nothing solid or objective to race in the first place, who's to say what's true and what's false?
Well, why do you think that she would give up her white privilege, actually? I mean, if given the opportunity to be a white woman at the top of this socioeconomic totem pole, why would she then reduce herself to a quote-unquote second-class citizen? What would motivate that type of behavior?
But we don't know if she's done that. We don't know when she doesn't go to the tanning booth and take her wig off and how she presents herself in other times when she's not marching for the NAACP. And I think you are absolutely right, and that's rooted in logic. But I don't think it's that deep for her. And
well,
I really don't.
She has said on air, she has said, look, you know, race is a fiction. And she's right. When she says that, she's taking a standard page from what social scientists and many biological scientists say today.
But then why identify? If that's the case, then why identify instead of just say, I'm human as I'm human? Because I feel, let's say for myself, and this is not about me, but I feel offended as an actual biracial woman that she's perpetrating a biracial woman for the NAACP.
What about her doing that offends you, though, Rain? Why do you? Because you have a real deep and visceral response to this story. Yeah, no, I do. I think it's important to hear what you have to say about it.
Because for me growing up, I was not accepted. Now all of a sudden, she's a white woman who said she was black, and black people are going, it's okay that she did that. But it wasn't okay 2 weeks ago when I'm trying to get a job and I'm me as a biracial woman. So I am offended by that. Why does she get the privilege to be accepted for this thing, and then we say, well, it's not really a race issue? No, it is. Fundamentally, it is.
And I think actually in some ways she was using privilege to do this because I think in our society it's often only white people who get to choose how they're going to identify. In general, race is something that we feel on the inside or comes from our community and our culture, but it's also how people perceive us. And so for the most part, it's people of color who are told, you are this. And no matter how you feel on the inside, you're going to be seen like this, you're going to be treated like this. And it's only white people.
I could feel like a white woman on the inside, but I do not have the luxury of transitioning or telling the world that I am indeed white. But I could feel as white. I could feel like a blonde, blue-eyed beauty. But
tell the cops that and see what they say. Exactly. But at the same time, for white people, the part of racial privilege is that we get to be seen as individuals, or we get, and then
you get to pick your identity.
We often get to pick our identity. So even in living as a black woman, it seems that she's acting out of a space of privilege.
But I think it's important to note that even as a black person, one of the hallmarks of identifying and being comfortable with yourself is realizing that your own identity. And so I think it's not, and I know this is not what you're saying, but it's not just white people who feel comfortable in their skin. There are a number of black people and Latina people and Asian people who have accepted their identity, they're proud of it, they're immersed in their culture in a healthy way, and also have a good sense of who they are.
Can we go on to Dylan Roof?
Yeah, because, Rain, I thought it was very interesting that one of the things that stood out to me was that Dylan Roof sat in that black church for an hour, and no one thought that he looked suspicious. And it just made me think, had Dylann Roof been a black man sitting in the back of a white church for an hour, I think that people would have looked at him or regarded him as a suspicious character.
Right.
And I'm just wondering how you all feel about that. Do you think that in many ways his white privilege afforded him the luxury of sitting in a black church and being welcomed with open arms, as vice versa? What do you think?
I think absolutely. I mean, white privilege, as my colleagues have laid out, it really consists of the ability to be free of the suspicions and the discriminations that dog other people. So he could sit there and people not think that he was a crazed murderer.
Right.
But we have seen time and again, right, in the last few months, the last few years, that black men, no matter how young they are, how unthreatening they never get the benefit of that doubt.
Yes.
And we've all I've been a victim of shopping while black. People have been victims of walking while black, swimming while black, breathing while black. I mean, you can't do anything while black, but sit in your house. And you can't even do that if you're Skip Gates, because you'll be arrested in your own home.
Absolutely.
But he was in a church, a place of love and acceptance, a place and refuge where tourists would stop. And Black community, traditionally, we are very accepting people. Yes. You're having Bible study. Why would you think that this person is going to harm you? And that's the sickening part to me, that he sat there for so long knowing what he was going to do.
This is a lot for all of us to have to sit and think about. And when we return, we are going to discuss the term, my favorite, not favorite, transracial. Does it exist, and what does it mean? We'll be right back.
One of the great things about Arise Entertainment 360 is we have this Arise to Your Health segment, which really focuses on the holistic approach of being healthy. So we do everything from working out to juicing to getting in shape by doing fun exercises like bouncing on a trampoline or wearing these bouncy boots on our feet when we're jumping all over the set. We've done karate, we've danced the weight off, we've done just about everything. And of course, I love when we eat on set, but we do it in a very healthy and clean way.
Welcome back to Arise and Shine. We're in the middle of a roundtable discussion about Rachel Dolezal. She's the former Spokane, Washington NAACP president who's been all over the headlines after her parents revealed that she's actually Caucasian and not African American.
And we've heard a lot about transgender, but transracial
That's a new one.
Is the new term many people have been throwing around in relation to this story. So, has this term existed before the story? And may I throw in before we begin, I'd like to throw it to you, and is that I heard, for me, what I heard is transracial is reminiscent of transatlantic slave trade, meaning that it was used in the adoption community before it was used anywhere else for kids who were adopted into families that were not of their racial origin.
That's correct. So we've been using, social scientists have been using, you're absolutely right. Social scientists have been using the term transracial to talk about people who are adopted into families of a race different than their own.
Yes.
But I think that the way that we've now appropriated that word to talk about Dolezal and others, there's actually some use to the term, I'm going to say. Because we know from research that lots of people change their racial identity. So many people change their racial identity that, in fact, demographers of the Census Bureau have found out that, you know, from one census to the next, the people that we were calling the white population in 2010, let's say, because the people who are going to be counted as the white population in 2020 are going to be a bunch of different people. So many people move in and out of the different categories. So we know that race changing is going on all the time. What's useful about the term transracial, though, is that it helps us realize that there are people who do that who are not necessarily multiracial. Because so far, when we've studied, you know, people who change race, it's normally been people who are mixed race. And they, you know, they say, as a kid, I really thought of myself as white, but now I'm thinking of myself more as Asian, so I'm going to switch the way I identify myself. We see that all the time. What's interesting about Dolezal's case is she's not, as far as we know, a mixed race person, or she is, but American Indian is not part of the ancestry. She's claiming for herself. So I think the term is letting us hone in on all this race shifting that is happening among people who are not mixed race. And it is happening. It is a real thing in that way. It really is happening.
Do you think that using that term, though, undermines the transgender movement? Some people have argued that she's just trying to jump on their bandwagon and she's appropriating transgender culture in the way that she's appropriated Black culture, and they don't like it at all. What do you think?
Well, I can see where they wouldn't like it, and I think they're two separate entities. I think in her case with transracial, I see it as something more global. And if she were a white woman who was saying, I support Black people, I am against injustice, and have adopted the attitudes of civil rights people and people who understand what's better for all, okay, I think she could use transracial. But it seems like she's only applying that term to herself, and not in a way that, in fact, is inclusive and imparts any conjoined
by making
values
a statement.
at all.
Let's say, as you would have, Ali, you would make it a statement. To me, you are someone then in the terms of transracial because of how you're teaching your kids. Like my mom is a white woman who taught me my Black identity in the sense that she wore a blonde Afro wig for my benefit, wasn't trying to pretend she was anything other than white, but to me that's transracial, as opposed to someone who's lying about the identity.
I think what's really important about what Amy's saying is that it's fundamental to the white supremacist movement is that race is biology, that we are biologically different racially, and that is not true. That because race is a social construction, we know that it's not, that we're actually more similar across race than I would be to somebody who's technically white or in my same racial group. And at the same time, race being a social construction doesn't mean it's not real. So we have this whole, you know, capitalism is a social construction also, and it controls everything that we do. And so I think what's happening here is that over time, people of color have often had to assimilate, and like European ethnic groups have had to assimilate to whiteness in order to be seen as white. And that was often a matter of survival and a matter of, you know, like it's life and death sometimes. Whereas this is a case of a cultural appropriation because it's somebody from the more powerful group saying, I want to take, you know, parts of your culture, and for me, because it's going to better my life, because I don't want to be seen, I can't, for whatever reason, I don't want to be white.
But that's where I think we have to challenge this notion of who the most powerful group is, because I think along with this construction of whiteness is also this myth of white supremacy, and that has been historic, and that's what we're always fighting against.
But it's a post-traumatic slave culture. Why we think that way, though?
There's no doubt, and I mean, I think whether it's media, whether it's you know. Researchers, I mean, we continuously reinforce this notion that to be better, you have to be whiter, you have to be lighter, and who has the power? And I think it's about really turning around and defining what that power is.
So do you think now, because of Rachel Dolezal and what has happened, that we are on the precipice of actually changing consciousness in terms of how we see race in this country, that maybe we're right there to realize it really is, supremacy is a lie?
Well, we have a Black president. I think to attribute anything to Rachel Dolezal other than being a soundbite or a topic for a week would really be misconstrued. The people doing the research, like Ann and Ali here, are really the ones who are really defining where we need to look. And I think we are giving her way too much credit and really need to look at people who are protesting and people who have given their lives and people who have suffered, and our president included, who really hold up what it means to be Black, what it means to be powerful, what it means to rule the world, basically.
You know, Ali, I want to ask you about why you wrote your Huffington Post piece about not wanting to be white either. Why was it important for you to share that with the world, one? And what were your own reservations about being white?
Well, I think at the time that I experienced that, I was living in South Africa. I was 21 years old, and I was living with a black family, and I was extremely angry at white South Africans about apartheid. And I was kind of experiencing this righteous anger living with a black family, and then suddenly realizing, wait a second, where I'm from, I'm the white person. It was only 4 years after apartheid had ended. It was 1998, and I heard everywhere people saying, "Can we just leave it in the past? This, you know, this happened so long ago." And I'm thinking, it happened 4 years ago. You know, the people I'm living with, their kids were born with no health insurance under apartheid. But I started to realize, you know, 40 years from now, their lives, they're still not going to have an equal opportunity if nothing's done to redress this injustice. And in the United States, the same kind of segregation had happened 40 years earlier, and here I'm the white person.
So would you aspire that, then would you equate that to white guilt? Did you have that, and that's why you immersed yourself into this culture?
I think I probably spent like a year, well, I only spent a few hours thinking, you know, it wouldn't, like, it wasn't even conscious. It was kind of like, I also wanted to burn my American passport. You know, I shaved my head. I didn't want to be American. I didn't want to be white because I saw how much power those identities had and how much damage they'd caused. And at the same time, it was really fast that I realized, I have to own this because I have, what I need to use my power and my privilege for is to make change. And I can't just ignore that that's there. That, you know, there's no way to get rid of it.
Right.
Yeah, and you have to work from a place of honesty in order to have authentic relationships.
Yeah. Dr. Taylor, I want to circle back to you, and speaking of honesty, can we talk about the deception and Rachel Dolezal's deception? Do you think, I mean, I can't psychoanalyze her, you can. Give me a breakdown of who this woman is. I mean, is she a pathological liar? Is she a charlatan? Or is this woman just a deeply troubled person who just got caught up in a series of lies? If you had to break down who she is, her mental profile, what would you say?
I mean, obviously I've never met her, and everything is from what I've seen, but I would definitely say that pathological liar may fit with her only because she's gone to such lengths to cover up everything. And most of us, I mean, you can tell white lies where you don't want to hurt someone. What she has done systematically has really been flat out lies, and it takes away, it discredits everything she's done, the good that she's done, and it also leaves her a lack of trust. And what, I mean, in this world today, we have communication, we have honesty, we have trust. I mean, those are the foundations of what we need, and I think that's the damaging part. There's, in her heart, I think she probably does want to do good and she believes what she's doing, but the way she did it is wrong. And then what happens is you build and build and build. So personally, I think that she does have some underlying personality issues that really make her feel like she has to present herself as someone that she's not. And where that comes from,
thank you.
Only her mother and father know.
So coming up, how did she do it? How did she get away with it for so long? Discussing more details of the deception. Next, we'll be right back.
Well, Arise is the only network that really covers comprehensively the African diaspora. It gives people in other parts of the world of color a chance to know about people here in the United States, us to know about them, and the world to know about us. So it's kind of an educational experience for everybody involved. Getting to know people through stories, through personal stories. You really get a chance to know what people are actually all about, what communities are about. How are we different? But more importantly, what commonalities we all share.
If I was building my own news network, I think I'd want broad, in-depth knowledge of important issues throughout the world.
I would want to recruit a fairly diverse staff that had different life experiences before they came to news.
We want to see how we can help ourselves and help benefit other people, not just see what's up with the celebrities and where they're going and traveling and buying this and buying that.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise and Shine. One of the elements to the Rachel Dolezal story that is fascinating to me is the level, as we were talking about before we went to break, deception.
Yes.
So my question is, how did she think she would not get caught?
Thank you, Rain. That's a great question. Seriously, how did she think she was going to get away with this? With Instagram, Facebook, with Twitter, social media. How did she think that she was just going to go quietly into the night as this fake black woman? I don't get it.
But, you know, with the one-drop rule, right, where anybody can be black. You can have any kind of ancestry and be considered black as long as people believe you have some drop of African ancestry. There's no way she could look or change her appearance in some way that wouldn't make her credible as a black person, frankly. She didn't even need to do all that stuff to her hair and skin, and still people could have believed that she was just a very light-skinned black person.
But did she really think just slapping on a weave and some self-tanner that she was going to keep up that charade for the rest of her life?
I want that self-tanner, by the way.
I mean, she was married to a black man.
Yes.
She did have half black siblings, and she had her son, and certainly she surrounded herself with enough, well, I don't want to use the word props, but I'm going to use the word props, if you will, to make that happen. But I do think, like you've heard the term, you know, if it's not a lie if you believe it. I really do think that she believed it.
But her very white parents are still very much alive, and they're very talkative. So she had to have known
Somehow
that at some point
out, right?
they were going to come out of the quote-unquote closet that she had stuffed them into. Don't you think? Or do you think she just figured, I'm going to ride this until
she's yet
till the
to
wheels
really
fall off?
apologize and acknowledge publicly.
She's never said that she's a liar. She has said it's creative nonfiction.
Also, from her perspective, in a sense, she's saying, and actually I think this is where there's a parallel with transgender, on the sense that on one hand, you have society has these definitions of race or gender as being these natural, biological, fixed categories. And along come people who say, you know, I don't buy that. That's not the way I see things. And in her case in particular, she's saying, I don't accept society's rules about what race is. You know, by my lights, you know, culture, you know, your cultural affiliation is what makes you a member of a race. And the thing is, she's not crazy for she didn't invent that, because that's been part of U.S. law. That is the way courts, when they have to decide what a person's race is, they have gone to who you associate with, who you're married to, what neighborhood you live in, how you dress, how you worship, and all of that.
But if when you talk to transgender people, they say, I was born, from the time I was born, the time I could talk, I knew that I was someone else. When I was 2 or 3, I felt different. She did not say that.
Well, which brings me, Dr. Taylor, to what you first said about her family. So I'm wondering, when the parents adopted these children into the household, is that in her head? Did she feel something that there's all this love to the new family members, now I need to identify to fit in, and that's what started this psychological change that she's been drawn on?
I mean, her parents said even when she was in middle school and high school that she identified certainly with African American culture. But I personally, I did not hear her say that when she was younger, she always felt like she was a different race or she was black. I didn't hear that from her.
She actually said, that was going to, you took the words right out of my mouth, Dr. Morgan. She actually said that she used to use the brown crayon when drawing pictures of herself. And that was when she first began to associate with black culture. And now, her parents say that that's not true. I'm inclined to believe them because she has a series of fabrications that have gone along with this story.
But just like then you go to Howard and you decide at Howard, today I'll be white and sue because I'm not being afforded the education of my black brothers and sisters. But a week ago, they were your black brothers and sisters. Now all of a sudden, you're Caucasian.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know about the crayon rule.
Right.
But I used to draw with the sienna crayon. That does not make me Puerto Rican. I don't understand. No, it does not. No, it doesn't.
I think that's a place where, in a sense, she was trying to mimic her understanding of transgender identity. So I think she tacked that on later personally.
Pathological. Goes back to the pathology of it all, right?
Yeah. Now, we know why you're angry about this, Rain, but why do you think that Black women are so angry about Rachel Dolezal. I mean, you can't go on Facebook without reading entire passionate screeds just taking this woman down.
Really?
What is behind that?
Because our identity as Black women has usually been through a negative experience at some point. You think you're one of everyone. You know, you're young and life is good, and one minute you're holding the hand of your white friend, and then, you know, the next year they won't play with you. And so establishing who you are, a lot of that has to come through the bumps. And to think that, you know, to be proud of who I am, right? Brown skin, natural hair, like I've had to go through a process. And that process is not just going to a self-tanner and putting on a curly wig. And that, for me, that's where the emotion comes, because yes, there's a lot of self-knowledge and power that does happen being a Black woman, but there's also a lot of suffering and pain and rejection. And I think that is what really has stirred the pot, I think, with most Black women, is how dare you think that you can just come in and assume this when, you know, this is a process.
I've read all of the privilege, none of the pain.
Right. But I think it's also worth keeping in mind that a lot of people are angry at her. I mean, so we talked about people in the transgender community, transracial adoptees also not happy with her. But, you know, we wouldn't be having this whole week-long media frenzy if there weren't a lot of white Americans who were very unhappy with her, very angry. And that's coming from another place. I mean, I think that really has a lot to do with, you know, coming back to white privilege, that, you know, white Americans, they don't like affirmative action. They're fed up with ways in which they think that people of color take advantage of racial categories.
Well, Allie, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you, are you angry at Rachel Dolezal? How do you feel about her?
I feel like at a different point in my own racial identity development, I might have been angry at her because whenever white people do things that remind me of my earlier self, it's kind of irritating, you know, agitating. I think mostly my commitment is to figure out, well, how am I like her? How am I like any white person who does something racist? And not to distance myself from them, but to say, there's some of her in me too. And so I'm just trying to relate to that feeling of not wanting to be white, and to understand that I have to just recognize as much as I want to be on this anti-racist road, there are things I will never understand about being Black. And that there are things that accrue to me because of my whiteness that I didn't earn, and that I sometimes can't even see, that I don't even acknowledge, and that I need to kind of keep my eye on that. The other thing I'm learning from her is intention versus impact. She didn't intend to be hurtful. It seems like she actually intended to do a lot of good, but her impact has been really significantly hurtful, and she hasn't owned that. And I think I do that, and I think a lot of white people do that, where, you know, if I run into you and I knock you on the floor, I'm gonna help you up, I'm gonna apologize, because especially if I didn't mean to do it, I don't want you to be hurting. But when we do something offensive racially,
and we're in denial about it.
Yeah, it's almost like we're afraid if we apologize, it means that we meant to do it, when in fact the intention and the impact have to be kept separate, and we have to own the impact.
You brought up the word impact. Dr. Taylor, what impact do you think this story or Rachel's actions will have on her biological child?
Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of things. If she's inconsistent in telling the truth, I mean, how inconsistent a parent is she? What his father has said, that she has kept him away from his son, which has an even bigger impact. So hopefully, maybe, I mean, no parent's perfect, right? And we do the best we can, but perhaps with all the media attention, she can really get back to her basic relationships, and that is of raising a son who knows who he is, can make his own decisions, which is what she's fighting for, and has a good relationship with his father.
What's the discussion that we can have as a community? And when I say community, I don't just mean Black, I mean Black, white, other, whatever. What is the discussion that we can have together about getting over our feelings about this, so we can move through this, and especially in light of what happened in South Carolina? How can we use this as a teachable moment?
Well, I think we have to take the emotion out of it and really focus on the facts. Like, I've never heard a white person talk about their whiteness like Allie has. I'm loving this right now. And so I think we have to be open to those discussions and listening to what our kids, especially when they say something or we say something, not to judge it, but really to examine it and sit with it and be able to tolerate it, to understand that 99.9% of our DNA is all alike.
Professor Manning, right?
Yes. So, you know, I would actually maybe take a slightly different tack, which is actually, let's not disregard the emotion altogether, because I think the emotion behind this debate is telling us a lot about the country. And what I hope will come out of this, I hope a good thing that will come out of this, will be us really examining how fluid racial categories are. So I hope that that Americans will finally understand that people are not born with racial categories that they just stick with their whole lives and die. There's been all kinds of moving across racial categories, and I hope it will push us to really realize how these categories in the end are invented and changed. I mean, right now, the Census Bureau is testing new categories for the next census race questions. We could have up to 2 new checkboxes on the race question. So this stuff is changing all the time. So I'm just hope that this conversation will let Americans, it'll kind of open our eyes to that reality.
And just to clarify, when I say emotion, I mean emotion shuts people down so much, especially the anger. And so I'm saying acknowledge it, but take a step back to really talk about the issue.
Have it be a constructive conversation. But we're going to keep our conversation going.
Yes, we
Stay
are.
right there. We're far from finished with this discussion, and we'll be right back. This is great, ladies. Let's keep talking.
I believe that people are watching news less today, definitely. I think that more so people are going online to catch their news.
We've numbed the human mind to murders and all these bad things. The content is a constant loop of the same stuff. So there needs to be, you know, new content all the time.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
So what we do is we bring together experts and analysts and thought leaders and CEOs in companies across many industries to not only provide the macroeconomic view, but news everyday people can use.
More nations join the fight against ISIL. The United States is counting down to a crucial election. Has this sentence been influenced by the court of public opinion?
Everyone's vote is critical in these elections. We shouldn't turn the situation into Fortress America.
How can so much be put on President Obama when it comes to issues that are perhaps out of his control?
You got to have your big boy pants on in that job.
Arise Review begins right now.
Welcome back to Arise and Shine. Rachel Dolezal's story has been fascinating and outrageous, and we're continuing the conversation. One of the things we were talking about in the break that I found so fascinating was the impact psychologically when you were talking about the younger girls on race. So I would like to discuss that some more.
Yeah, I mean, what I found curious about this situation is that Rachel Dolezal essentially moved from being at the top of the totem pole to the top of the black totem pole. And she went from having white privilege to having quote unquote biracial or light skin privilege. And that nuance has been lost in the conversation because frankly, a lot of people that have been talking about this don't understand that there is light skin privilege in black culture. And I was just wondering if you ladies could weigh in on that.
I think that's a really important angle to bring up because a lot of Americans may think that that kind of light skin privilege disappeared, you know, after the Civil War, after slavery ended and, you know, or the Civil Rights Movement. But in fact,
the brown paper bag is still very real.
It is very real. Well, and I think more importantly, the socioeconomic differences that people in the black community have by color are still very much with us. So the most recent research confirms that's still in place.
And I think part of it are the images that we see on television. Certainly it's changing, but what as black people, and certainly growing up in my girls saw were the lighter skin black women who were presumed to be more beautiful. And I think the reality is
you can't turn on a music video without seeing the light-skinned girlfriend or beauty vixen who's celebrated for her beauty, and there's not a dark-skinned woman to be found.
But it reinforces the wrong message. And so, I mean, studies show that black girls have actually, teenagers have higher self-esteem than white girls. But that gets lost in the mix and we don't hear that. And somewhere in that transition from young being a young teenager to adulthood, that changes a bit. And part of it is, I think, the lack of recognition of seeing ourselves, the difficulty in finding a partner, and then these images that we have still about the angry black woman or what it means to be a strong, powerful black woman.
Which then, you just said the angry black woman.
Right.
So one moment just to step aside and go to South Carolina in terms of the people at the hearing saying, we forgive. And I wonder if that's because we don't want to be seen as the angry black culture, the angry black man, the angry black woman. So we put it under this guise of our Christianity or whatever that is to be docile to America rather than acknowledging that this made us angry and upset so that we can move through it. So it's almost like, again, we keep stepping backwards in the eyes of, again, maybe white privilege or...
And Rain is referring to the moment when these families who were the victims of this shooting at the bond hearing, and they all repeatedly said, I forgive you, I forgive you. And they forgave him so quickly.
But they did also with Rachel Dolezal, many people, you know what I mean? The same thing.
Right.
We understand, it's okay. Is that...
I mean, I think
But do you have a problem with that, Rain? Do you think that black people were too quick to forgive? Do you think they should have been allowed to own their anger and be angry?
I think it's a part, in the studies that I've done, I think that it's a part of the post-traumatic slave culture that we have this thing of not wanting to appear angry because we're always told we are angry. And so I think that we squash that part of ourselves, but then we're not moving through it to own our power. And I think part of me wants to see us owning our power, owning our anger, and saying this is justified in order for there to be change. How do you women?
I think that, though, what this quick forgiveness is telling us more about the particular context of this religious community that this horrible massacre took place in, right? So, because think about, there are many other ways in which Black Americans have been quick to show their anger in recent weeks and months around police shootings. So I think that we're seeing that quick that move to apologize because we're looking at people, families who are really steeped in a Christian tradition which prizes that ready forgiveness. But I don't think it's symptomatic of Black America.
And I think it speaks to their character at a time of just complete shock and horror. And what else are they going to do? It was moving, the fact that they could forgive. I'm sure that...
But really, as someone who studies psychology, is it really that it was moving, or again, are we going to a place where we feel, because of our Christianity, that I have to be this way to show the world we're not all going to go riot right now? We're all able to have this forgiveness.
I don't think that they were thinking on that level. I think that their pain, that all they could do in the moment, and they were a Christian community, and it just spoke to, I think, the tightness and frankly, character and being bigger people than I probably could be. That's all that they could say. I'm sure the anger will come later. But I think for me, like personally, I still feel just this deep, profound sadness for what has happened, and have really been unable to immerse myself in it because it's really overwhelming. So I applaud the fact that they could say forgiveness, and just leave it with them.
The Confederate flag continues to fly full mast. Yes. I mean, I can't even finish the question. Ladies, just your reaction to something like that. What does that say? I mean, to many people, that flag is tantamount to Nazi symbolism. So, why is this okay?
And the Germans have outlawed the swastika.
Absolutely.
So if they've outlawed the swastika, why can't we take down the Confederate flag?
Right. I think it's a sign that white supremacy is alive and well, not just in like these random, well-organized hate groups, but also within our society. Dylan Roof went before a judge in South Carolina who knows his parents and his grandparents and who called him and his family victims. And that is a symptom of white supremacy, where we have institutions run by white people who are going to see white people as more innocent and more deserving of forgiveness than Black people, where we have cops with power, with the authority to use violence, who are more willing and quick to use that violence on Black people and other people of color than on white people. And so the fact that it flies above the State House is a reminder that Dylan Roof was not just one random crazy pathological individual. He was a product of a society that continues to valorize whiteness over other races, even though we know races are a social construction.
I think that flag symbolizes the ultimate in white privilege, the fact knowing what it represents for years, hundreds of years, and it's still flying.
But it also symbolizes, I think, a very important aspect of white supremacy, which is that white supremacists believe that they are the ones who are threatened. They believe that they are the ones who are victims, right?
And if you read
Roof's
Dylan
idea
Roof's manifesto, that's all he spoke about. White
exactly.
men are
Blacks
under
were
attack.
threatening
Blacks were
white
threatening.
women.
You're
and
raping our women. You know,
Which
we're
is
the
such an old
minority.
ideology, especially if you read any of the books on white supremacy in terms of the KKK
it's a
or
constant
anything.
thread. And the Confederate flag symbolizes, because of course it's the lost cause, right? So people who identify that feel like we're the underdogs, we're the ones who lost out in history. So it brings a really toxic mix of symbols together.
I want to circle back to Rachel Dolezal. How can we actively dispute her race? I mean, if she says that's who she is, who are we to deny her that? You know, if she is, if she's black,
I think this is why it's been such a head scratcher,
Right.
because there's no genetic test that we can give her or any of us to tell us what anybody's race is, because those racial groupings are ones that we've invented, that Europeans invented in the 16 and 1700s. We just, take those boxes and try to shove everybody into them, and so it's not coming from our DNA. So if that's the case, and if we understand, and we need to help more people understand how these categories are human inventions, not biological constructs, if that's the case, then where do we draw the lines? What do we call a valid racial identity? And that's why she puts us in this quandary, because we all have the sense that she's lying.
So then
but what's the truth?
is racial identity going to become
when
more
she took a
prevalent? Is racial identity going to become more prevalent? Do we foresee time in the future when it can be done without anyone being mad and angry or outraged? Is this something we can look for? That we as a society are going to be looking forward to?
That would be the hope for the future.
That would be the hope.
Yeah,
I
certainly.
think it's possible, and especially as more and more people come to identify as mixed race. I mean, one thing that got lost in this whole news frenzy was the Pew Research Center did a big report on multiracial America. It just came out like a day before the Dolezal story broke. And they put it at about 7% of the population was identifying themselves as mixed race, which is also a huge undercount. If you think about how many African-American people, pretty much everybody has some mixed ancestry, Latinos and so forth. So if we took all those folks into account as mixed race, more like 40% of the country would be mixed race.
Wow.
So I think that what is going to happen, that Dolezal's story is just part of a launching pad in which we're going to have more and more conversations about category shifting, people moving between who's to say what the right category is, and I think it's going to be a good thing for us to have those conversations.
Okay. All right.
I'm really honored and privileged that you joined us today on the show to be able to have such a frank and honest conversation, especially in the media.
It's true. I agree, Rain. I do have one more question about Miss Rachel Dolezal. Why do you think her story has captivated us in such a way? What is it about her as a figure that has made her so interesting to us? I mean, a part of me thinks slow news week. A part of me also thinks America loves a good train wreck, and she's the epitome of an amazing train wreck. What is it about her that has made this something that we've been talking about for the better part of a week?
I think that she symbolizes basically this collision course that we're on now between old ways of thinking about race, old traditional ideas of, race was in your blood and fixed and all of that, with these new theories coming, these new ways of thinking about race as these socially invented categories. So she's kind of right at the crossroads of that. And I think the other reason, too, is that there's just a lot of anger in the public and the white public about any use of racial classification, right? We've seen these referendums, moves in different states to just get rid of racial categories altogether so that we can't enforce affirmative action that way. So I think that there are a lot of people who are just angry that we use racial categories in any way that could help people of color. And I think that's where some of this anger is coming.
Again, what an amazing and frank discussion. And we're going to be right back, and we'll continue. Thank you.
If I was building my own news network, I think I'd want broad, in-depth knowledge of important issues throughout the world.
I would want to recruit a fairly diverse staff that had different life experiences before they came to news.
We want to see how we can help ourselves and help benefit other people, not just see what's up with the celebrities and where they're going and traveling and buying this and buying that.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
There's certain news programs that have a Democrat and a Republican, and all they do is, here's the Democrat saying his side and the Republican say, it's a little debate show, but not everybody is a sort of an extremist on one side or the other. People are in the middle a lot more.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
What an amazing show we've had today. Dr. Janet Taylor, Professor Ann Morning, and Dr. Ali Michael. Thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. Thank you, Lola, for being my co-host.
Thank you for having me, and thank you so much for all of your input, ladies. That was an amazing discussion.
You can catch Lola every day right here, along with her co-host, Shannon Lanier, on Arise Entertainment 360, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And if you're in the New York City area, you'll want to catch Reign's one-woman show, Fried Chicken and Latkes, at the National Black Theater in Harlem. It's an amazing show. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll think it's genius. And you go to nationalblacktheater.org to get tickets. The show is running until June 28th. Get there right now.
See you next time, everyone.
And have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.